All right, everybody. So we're going to talk about a huge influence on me, Eddie Hazel. Uh, to me, from a psychedelic perspective, um, he's akin to Jimi Hendrix in that he took, a bedrock of R&B, old school R&B influence, and infused it with fuzz and echo and wah wah and feedback and rock influence, modern rock influence in the late 60s, and just did something really unique and groovy. And I first became aware of Eddie, the Funkadelic album Maggot Brain, which is kind of his most notable recording. And Maggot Brain itself, the track, is, him basically alone playing a really emotional, one of the most emotional kind of solo pieces I've ever heard. And George Clinton, apparently for inspiration for that track, he told Eddie play as if you just found out that your mama died. And there's definitely that kind of, it's a real heavy track. um, but also, I I heard that first, but the first Funkadelic album, which is called Mama What's a Funkadelic, which came out in '69, that record has probably continued to be one of my favorite records of all time. That's like a top 10 desert island record for me. And his playing all over that record is just absolutely insane. And it's sort of like to think that that's when Hendrix was playing Woodstock, and that's when Isaac Hayes, I'm wearing my Isaac Hayes shirt today, Hot Butter Soul. That's when Hot Butter Soul was coming out, which again was sort of melding psychedelic influence with soul music. So some of the things in particular that Eddie was really good at is number one, his sense of atmospherics. Now, out of context, it's not going to be as apparent, okay? But he was super into manipulating tape echo, okay? And George Clinton was super into it too. So actually, I have a delay, a Strymon El Capistan, and I have a preset. So that's my normal, so. So, needless to say, at that time in the late '60s, not everybody was using tape echoes yet. All right, so that alone differentiates himself, and he didn't use reverb and delay at the same time. So again, I don't have my reverb on my amp, but one thing I don't. So if you can figure a way to program something like this into what you're using, that's groovy. If not, it's not necessary. But this is something that I do from time to time, and I'm totally copying it from Eddie Hazel. There's a buddy of mine who I kind of learned that I could do this from. Who's a really great guitar player in a band called Khruangbin. Mark Spear, who's another amazing modern guitar player. But basically, where you can have the tap function, if I hold the tap function, because I don't use tap tempo for anything, you can use it where you can put your foot on it, and it makes the echo repeats sort of run away like an Echoplex would. And so, for example, and then it goes away when I take my foot off. So that's something where it's I'm totally copying Eddie Hazel, because he would manipulate tape echoes like that all the time to kind of create weird landscapes. And Hendrix didn't do that. Hendrix used feedback and stuff, which Eddie Hazel does as well. But the manipulation of tape echoes and doing weird things with them is definitely like an Eddie thing. And another thing tonally is Eddie was really into using fuzzes. I still don't know to this day like what actual fuzz he used. I have an old fuzz face down here. So again, like within the confines of R&B music, that's pretty new, you know. So like Eddie was just so ahead of the game, you know, but he's never been like on the tip of people's tongues as far as like a major like known influence. But he certainly was a huge influence to some other people that I really love, like in particular Hillel Slovak in the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the original Red Hot Chili Peppers. Eddie was a huge influence, and then also to John Frusciante, who's, you know, a huge influence, like a contemporary influence, if you will, on me. Eddie is a big influence on John, and all of the Chili Peppers, really. I know Flea is a huge Funkadelic fan too, and so I always go back to Eddie. Eddie became the guitarist in Parliament Funkadelic. You know, if you haven't like gone into the rabbit hole of all things George Clinton, it's a little confusing because originally you have the Parliaments, which was George's vocal group in the 60s. They were like a doo-wop group. And then you have Funkadelic, which is the rock band that he formed in like the late 60s. And then you have Parliament Funkadelic, which is the vocal group with the band, okay? And then you have like the Mothership, you have Bootsy's Rubber Band, you know, you have all this side stuff, you know? So Eddie was a part of all of that, but really it's like the first 4 Funkadelic albums, in particular, the first album and the third album, you know, Mama Wants a Funkadelic and Maggot Brain. But the other records, Free Your Mind and Your Ass Will Follow, which is the second record, and then Cosmic Slop, which is the fourth record. Those are all important records to check out. Another thing is, you know, his use of the wah-wah pedal. There's a great intro to a tune called I Got a Thing that is all that's all Eddie, and it goes like this. And the thing that's notable about that is like that's 1969, man. Like that's not that's like 2 years before Shaft, before Skip Pitts did, you know. So it's like for him to be using the wah-wah as such a percussive thing so early, I don't know where he got it from. Because even like Jimmy, like, you know, Hendrix, obviously, you know, like using it like that, but like that aggressive, that. Because the beginning of the song starts with just him doing that. He's by himself completely, and he sets up, and the whole track is in halftime. Like just for context, it's like the track is. And he over the top of that is doing double time. which is just, it's just so funky and it's just so cool. And another thing that that Eddie would do a lot is milking the note for everything that it's worth, which is something that I cover a bit in the practice sessions course here on TrueFire. But just that thing of he would, you know, in already in music at that time, like with Jimmy Page and some other people in the rock genre, like shredding is kind of starting to happen. And there's just something so satisfying about Eddie, like in a, you know, a tune like that, like just for the sake of example, that, you know, him being like, a lot of hanging on to notes and a lot of overbending. All that kind of stuff is very, very much a part of Eddie's style, you know. So there's a lot of it that's in me, and he's, you know, an #1 influence on me. And it's funny because a lot of times people mistake certain things that I do sometimes, and they're like, oh man, that's just like Jimmy. And, you know, it may seem like it, but conceptually, a lot of the time in my own mind, I'm pulling from Eddie, you know. They're closely related. So it's an honest thing to kind of mistake, because there is some crossover there. But I mean, you know, as much as Hendrix is an influence on me, Eddie is as much, if not more so, especially the man that I am now. I should also note, like, some other really big modern kind of contemporary peers and influences love Eddie as well, like Binky Griptite, who's the guitar player in the Dap Kings. Big influence on him. And also my man Tommy Brennick, who was also in the Dap Kings and is in the Budos Band and in the Menahan Street Band, and also was Charles Bradley's like partner and producer and all that. There's a lot of shared love of Eddie. Eddie lived most of his life just outside of New York City, in New Jersey, and unfortunately he passed away in the early 90s, and I never got to meet him or see him play. But he's just a huge influence on me. And like I said, I hold him kind of in a similar place with Jimi Hendrix, of that it's like the most soulful version of like psychedelic rock. And I love psychedelic music of all types. And, you know, meaning like whether it's like far out jazz or like Miles, you know, or Yusuf Lateef, or it's garage psychedelic music like the 13th Floor Elevators, or the Velvet Underground or something, or it's like psychedelic, you know, blues of lots of different, you know, like Electric Mud, Muddy Waters, or the Howlin' Wolf psychedelic record that Pete Cozy was playing guitar on. All that stuff. I just love like when the psychedelic movement like hit all the different genres in the late 60s and the early 70s, and Eddie was the king, man, and will always be. So this is it's going to be fun. We're going to break down some things that that I think are kind of landmarks of his style, and definitely things that have imparted a big amount of influence on me personally.